Hello and welcome to today's flight. Today we're going to fly a short instrument procedure from Tacoma Narrows Airport in Gig Harbor, Washington. The reason we're flying this one is, number one, it's short, and two, it incorporates many elements of instrument flight for training purposes. What we're going to do today is we're going to take off from runway 17 and we're going to fly this missed approach procedure, which calls for climbing to 1,500. Then we're going to make a climbing right turn to 2,000 feet on heading 290. And then we're going to intercept the Seattle 227 radial inbound to the SCENN intersection. But instead of holding, we're going to fly that procedure turn outbound, turn the airplane around, and fly inbound on the localizer and ILS to a landing on runway 17. So let's take a look at what that is going to look like. So we're going to take off runway 17 on runway heading to 1,500 feet. Then we're going to make a climbing right turn to heading 290. And we're going to do that to 2,000 feet. And then we're going to intercept the 227 radial off the Seattle Vortac. And we're going to fly that inbound to the SCENN intersection, which is right here. And then we're going to fly that outbound and execute the procedure turn, which calls for outbound, or the reciprocal of the inbound heading, of 347 degrees. And then we're going to turn 302 degrees for 1 minute. And then we're going to turn the airplane around and fly 122 degrees inbound until we intercept the localizer. And then we're going to fly that to a landing. All right, so that's what we're going to do today. Let's go ahead and fly, and then we'll debrief after the flight and see how we did. I'm going to be tracking this on ForeFlight. I'm not going to be using ForeFlight for navigation purposes, but after the flight, we'll take a look at our flight path and analyze it. Here we are getting ready to depart runway 17, and as you can see, we have nav1 tuned to 109.1, which corresponds with the ILS frequency here at Tacoma Narrows Airport. The nav2 radio is tuned to 116.8, which corresponds with the SeaTac VOR. You can see on nav1 we are receiving deflection on both glide slope and localizer, and we're also receiving a signal from the SeaTac VOR as you see it here on the ground. The weather is currently set to reflect a typical marine layer, as is experienced often here at Tacoma Narrows Airport. Departing in conditions like this would normally require an IFR clearance, and we would be talking to air traffic control, but for the purposes of this training demonstration, we're going to take off and we are going to fly the missed approach procedure, which incorporates a lot of elements of instrument flight. All right, and here we are on our rollout, checking our directional gyro, engine instruments in the green, power available for takeoff, and we see our airspeed indicator is alive. And rotate. I'm going to go ahead and switch here to IFR view, which is a preset camera setting that I have in the cockpit, so that we're looking only at our instruments. Typically with these marine layers, you would be in the clouds for about 1,000, 1,500, sometimes even 2,000 feet, and then you would come out the top in crystal clear blue skies. Today we're going to stay in the instrument view the entire flight until we're at our missed approach point, which is 200 feet AGL, or 494 feet here at Tacoma Narrows for runway 17. And this procedure calls for a climb straight out to 1,500 feet, then climbing right turn to heading 290 to 2,000 feet. And then we're going to intercept the radial from the SeaTac VOR. That's the 227 radial. So we have the reciprocal of that tuned 047 in our nav2 radio. And we're going to look for a center deflection on the nav2. And then we're going to turn inbound to the SCENN intersection on the 227 radial from the SeaTac VOR. And we're going to track that inbound until we intercept the SCENN intersection, which is also the localizer for the ILS 17 approach. We're going to fly that outbound for 2 minutes on heading 347, as we showed on the chart earlier. And here we're making our right turn. We reach 1,500 feet. Standard rate turn to the right. Looking at our turn coordinator there. The wingtip is on the lower indicator, which is a nice smooth standard rate turn. And we're going to roll out on 290. There we are rolling out. And we're going to maintain this heading until we intercept the radial off the SeaTac VOR. And then again, we're going to track that inbound. Here we are coming up on our altitude at 2,000 feet, so we're going to level off. Now I will say that when I took my instrument flight test, you couldn't go below your assigned altitude by any amount, and you couldn't go above it by more than 50 feet. You also couldn't deviate from heading by more than 5 degrees. I can assure you we're not going to be able to stay within those numbers during this flight, but I'll try my best. All right, so here we're on our heading and our assigned altitude. See that we're slightly below the 2,000 there. I'll make constant corrections as we fly along. And we're going to maintain this heading, 290, and we're looking at VOR number 2. We'll look for deflection coming in off the SeaTac 227 radial or 047 inbound. And it takes a little while to intercept this. It's a pretty good distance to that radial. Again, maintaining 2,000 feet, heading 290. I am tracking this flight on ForeFlight so that we can do a debrief, but I am not using ForeFlight for the purposes of the instrument flight itself. This is all going to be by navigation radios. And it's a great training exercise because, again, it incorporates a lot of elements of instrument flight, and it's fairly short. So again, still looking for deflection on that VOR number 2. Checking our engine instruments, everything is still in the green. Typical power setting in this airplane is 2,300 RPMs at cruise. Still looking at that VOR number 2. You can see we have localizer deflection on VOR number 1, but not glide slope yet. As we get a little bit closer, it should be able to pick up that glide slope. Okay, their glide slope you saw just popped in on VOR number 1. As we get a little bit closer, we should start to see deflection there on VOR number 2 pretty soon. It looks like it's starting to move now. Yeah, it looks like we have some movement. So we're going to make our inbound turn soon. It's a really sharp turn, as I showed earlier, and it really requires an early turn to intercept properly. And if we're off slightly, we'll make our corrections as we fly inbound. Now, probably start my turn pretty soon here. And we'll make sure that we capture it properly as we roll out on our turn. If not, again, we'll make slight corrections. You can see the glide slope is alive and almost centered. So there's going to be 3 ways that we know we intercept the SCENN intersection. 1, we're going to have our outer marker indicator. And the other is we're going to have the glide slope is going to be centered. And the other is that the localizer is going to be centered as well. So we're going to track the localizer outbound on heading 347 for 2 minutes, and then we're going to execute our procedure turn. So again, we probably turned a little bit early, so we're going to fly slightly left of course on the SeaTac 227 radial, and we'll center that needle here as we make our way toward the SCENN intersection. So it looks like it's coming in, so we'll go ahead and get that centered and then fly inbound at 047. So I'm slightly left of, flying a little bit left of our course here so that we capture that radial. And it's coming in nicely now. Almost centered. Just a little bit more. Getting there. Got another couple of minutes and we'll be at the SCENN intersection. And then again, after we're done with this flight, we'll go ahead and review the 4-flight ground track on our track log. So we're holding about 045 degrees right now, 040, just to bring that needle in. It's getting there, pretty close. And we'll turn right here just to track that inbound. I think when we look at the 4-flight track, we're going to be super close. There, it's pretty much centered, so we'll turn to 047, continue inbound. Again, listening for the outer marker beacon, looking for center deflection on the VOR number 1 CDI, the localizer. And the glide slope will also be centered. All right, looks like we're tracking really good inbound on the CTAC radial. And maintaining 2000, 047 on the heading. Now that localizer is going to come in really fast since we're pretty close to the localizer station, and that's a lot more sensitive than the VOR radial. So when we hear the outer marker beacon, we're going to go ahead and begin our left turn at a standard rate to the outbound of 347 degrees. All right, everything is looking good. We're right on that radial, tracking inbound to CTAC. And now we're making our turn. All right, so here we have the localizer, and you can see the CDI on VOR number 1 coming in really quickly. So now we know we're on our localizer. We're going to go ahead and roll out here on 347 and try to hold that localizer as we make our outbound. You can see the clock on the left. So I looked at that clock, and so we're going to do a 2-minute outbound. Again, maintaining 2000 the entire time. So right now the CTAC VOR is no longer a factor. We're tracking the localizer on VOR number 1. And after 2 minutes, we'll go ahead and make our procedure turn, which calls for an outbound turn of 302 degrees. We'll hold that for 1 minute. And then we'll turn inbound, which is 122 degrees, and intercept the localizer inbound. All right, so we're watching our clock. Everything's looking good. We have pretty good on the localizer. So now it's reverse sensing. So instead of turning in the direction of the needle to capture the needle, we're going to turn away from the needle to center the CDI. So reverse sensing outbound is something to keep in mind. You can see the glide slopes getting ever further away from center. That's of course because we're maintaining 2000 and we are a pretty good distance now away from the SCENN intersection, which is where you'll get center deflection on the glide slope. All right, pretty good. We're pretty good holding that the CDI nicely on the localizer. And we're about 20 seconds away from making our left turn out to 302 degrees. Another few seconds here, we'll make our left turnout. And there we're turning against standard rate. Looking at that turn coordinator, putting the wingtip on the lower marker. And that corresponds to about 17 degrees. All right, rolling out on 302. Now we looked at the clock. Looks like it was about on the 9, so we're gonna make our right turn standard rate to 122 degrees inbound when the second hand reaches that 9 again. So now we're not tracking any navigation radio, we're simply holding a heading. Got about 30 seconds, we'll make our inbound turn 122 degrees. So everything's looking pretty good. We're at just slightly above 2,000 feet, maintaining a 302 degree heading. Got about another 15 seconds. We'll begin our right turn, inbound. And there it is. So we'll make our standard rate turn to the right, again 122 degrees. And at that point, we'll be looking at our VOR number 1 for center deflection on the localizer. And there's 090, looking for 122 degrees. And rolling out. Okay, now we're looking at the localizer, the CDI on nav 1. That starts to come in. It comes in pretty quick. Because it's a lot more sensitive typically than a VOR radial unless you're super close to the VOR station. Now it's starting to come in. I'll go ahead and begin my turn, keeping an eye on that CDI. All right, so I'm going to roll out just a little bit here. Looks like I might have made my turn just slightly early. I'm going to let that come in a little bit more, and then continue my turn inbound to a heading of 167 degrees. That's the inbound course for the ILS. So I'm just holding slightly left of my inbound course to capture that localizer. Get that all nice and centered. All right, it's coming in. Again, keeping an eye now on the glide slope, listening for the outer marker beacon, and then center deflection on the SeaTac 227 radial on the SeaTac VOR. So those 3 indications will tell us that we're at the SCENN intersection, and that's where we're going to begin our descent. All right, that we have pretty good center deflection there on the ILS, and we're going to try to hold that, looking at the glide slope. Watching VOR number 2 for the SeaTac 227 radial, looking for that to center. All right, everything's looking good, maintaining 2,000. We'll make any adjustments on our inbound course as we watch the CDI on the localizer. And looking kind of over the dash there, it looks like we're in clear sky, so there's probably like pea soup below us. which again is pretty typical of a marine layer. Everything's looking good. We're still watching that glide slope. You'll start to see both that moving down, and the CDI on VOR number 2 will start to move left. Looks like we're starting to see movement on CDI number 2 there. As we approach the SeaTac 227 radial, glide slopes coming in as well. And we should hear the outer marker beacon pretty close to when both of those indicators reach their center deflection. And then we'll pull the power back and add flaps 1 or 10 degrees of flaps. I'm going to come a little bit left here as we watch the CDI number 1 on localizer is moving a little bit left. Pretty close now to the SCENN intersection. All right, so we have outer marker. We're going to begin our descent and add flaps 1. So now you can see the CDI centered on VOR number 2. Glide slope is centered on VOR number 1. And we're going to try to maintain that glide slope as we make our way inbound here from the SCENN intersection. Again, the decision height is 494 feet, which corresponds with 200 feet AGL just before the runway threshold. And that's where we're going to come out from under the hood. All right, looking good. Coming up on 1,600. Glide slope's looking good. Localizer's looking good. The CDI on VOR number 2 is no longer a factor. It played its role. But we keep it tuned to that if we had to do a missed approach. If we came out from under the hood and we could not see the runway, we would execute the missed approach procedure. It's a little bit unorthodox to fly the missed approach procedure from a takeoff, but we're doing it for training purposes only. Typically would be executed when you come out from, or well, in this case, out from under the hood at decision height and you can't see the runway. You would execute the very same missed approach procedure, but the difference is instead of taking off from the runway, you're doing it from 200 AGL. All right, everything's looking good. We're going to kind of reduce our sink rate to kind of capture that the glide slope. We're just slightly below our desired glide slope. All right, the CDI on the localizer is deflecting right, so we're just going to make a kind of nice gentle right turn to capture that. Everything's looking good. Sink rate's looking good. We have a good glide slope there, and we're going to make a slight right turn to capture that, the CDI on the localizer. We're at 1,100 feet. Again, decision height's 494. For the purpose of this, I'll just make it 500. All right, we're looking good. Everything's centered. Looks like I'm slightly above glide slope. So I'm going to increase my sink rate here a little bit. Keeping an eye on that glide slope. Going to increase my sink rate just a tad more. It's like I need to come a little bit left. Now we're at 900 feet, coming a little bit left. Going to increase my sink rate slightly. There's 800, coming up on 700 feet. All right, the glide slope. Now we're slightly below glide slope. I need to reduce my sink rate a little bit. Again, coming a little bit left. Bring that localizer in. 600 feet, 100 to go. Okay, decreasing my sink rate to bring that glide slope back in. About 50 feet to go. And we're going to come out from under the hood now. All right, we do see the runway. And we're going to go ahead and add flaps 2 here. Reduce power. Probably bring back in a little bit of power here. And we'll go ahead and make a normal landing, and then after we taxi over, we'll take a quick look at ForeFlight to see what our ground track looks like, and we'll kind of review our training flight, debrief it over there by the hangar. Okay, everything's looking good on the ground. I'm going to go ahead and taxi off here at Alpha 2, and again we'll do a quick debrief. Alright, so here's a track log of our actual flight, and that's us on runway 17 getting ready to take off. And as we indicated earlier, we're going to take off and fly runway heading to 1,500 feet, and then we're going to make a climbing right turn. So there we are, climbing out and reaching 1,500 feet, then climbing right turn to 2,000, leveling off, and then we're going to fly 290 heading outbound, and then intercept the 227 radial off the Seattle VOR, and there I am kind of chasing the needle, and then once I got it centered, we followed that inbound to the SCENN intersection, and then instead of holding as is indicated in the missed approach procedure, we went ahead and flew the procedure turn. So here we are outbound on heading 347, and then left turn to 302 for 1 minute, and then after 1 minute, standard rate turn to the right, tracking inbound at 122 degrees, intercepting the localizer, and then flying that inbound to a landing. So here we are coming up on SCENN intersection, and there we are at SCENN, and that's when we begin our descent. So we'll go ahead and show our descent profile right here. So that's us tracking inbound and descending. That shows our altitude there at 1,000 feet, 900, 700, 600, 500, landing and taxiing over for the debrief. And here's a quick look at our flight path overlaid with the IFR chart. You can see the entire flight path, and this is a close-up view of our takeoff, climb out to 1,500, then right turn 290, climb it at 2,000, and then you can see there that we made our right turn to intercept the 227 radial off the SeaTac VOR. And here's a look at our procedure turn where we intercepted the SCENN intersection turn outbound on heading 347, and then 302 for 1 minute, then inbound on 122, and there you can see where we intercepted the localizer inbound for the ILS 17 approach. So that's it for our IFR workout here at Tacoma Narrows Airport. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon.